Greetings and welcome to the next episode of the Hourlings Podcast Project. My name's Martin Wilsey and I'm your host. I'll start off the intros today with a fun fact about my own self. Ever since I quit to write full-time, I've started to learn to cook, and I'm doing a pretty good job. Shae, you're next.
Nice. I want to come over to Marty's house.
You do.
Hey.
You really do.
Very nice house.
Yeah. I'm Shae. I write under SC McGalley. And my fun fact is I have been knighted by a chivalric order in London. And one of my favorite things to do is to wear the fancy medals out and have people question them and think that it's something really huge, like the Queen of England herself has knighted me. When it's just a small fraternal order. But yeah, I love it.
Jeffrey.
Yes, I'm Jeffrey Jacobs. And my fun fact is this. I know how to forensic a Word document. I know how to tell when you added that and how to know when you subtracted that. And I know how to unzip it and find the XML inside.
Useful.
Everybody's got to have a hobby.
Yeah.
I'm very scared.
Dave, what about you?
My fun fact is, like a lot of people, I wanted to be a writer for a long, long time and never really got serious about it until I went to the World Science Fiction Convention in Chicago in 2012. And through various happenstances, I ended up having dinner with Hugh Howey, the New York Times bestselling writer of Wool. And he told me this about this little thing called Kindle and indie publishing and things like that. And that really started my journey towards being serious about being a writer. So thanks, Hugh. It's all because of you.
Wool, great book. If you haven't read that book, read that book. Great stuff. Great stuff. Well, today's topic is the hook. What is it defined as? How we make one? Where does it start? How do you sink the hook? Where does it go? I think that I'll kick stuff off. I actually believe that the hook really starts with the title. I think the title is, if not the hook itself, it can be the bait on the hook. I think after that, then it gets you to look at the cover. The cover and then the blurb. That's where all the hooks start for me. And then finally, the preview pages. We'll talk more as we go around about how the hooks happen in that, but that's the place where I'll start. Shae, what do you think?
You can't talk about hooks without talking about first lines, especially in the first chapter. And there have been some really awesome first lines in history. Definitely Google, awesome first lines. And so I actually was one of those writers who at first thought that, a good first line or a good opening is always going to be dialogue, some interesting, snappy line of dialogue. But as I read more about hooks and the theory of what is a good hook, I learned that dialogue is sometimes not considered to be the best way to hook your reader, because it's just a floating head for the reader at this point. If they're jumping into that story right away, you might not want to start with dialogue. They don't know who's talking. So better to start with a line of action so that the reader can visualize or hear something. So I've been focusing on that with my opening lines, having really strong action to open my my story.
Yeah, I think it's really, really super important, the very first sentence of your story. Super important.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead, guys. We'll just jump in.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I mean, here's the thing. I was thinking that titles, right? That's a great hook indeed. Like some titles are one word, and one word evokes an idea. I have a friend who has a story that just got published called Cadillac. That's it. Title is Cadillac. On the other hand, a really long title like Let's Kill John A. or John Wilkes Booth Must Die. A real mouthful of a title, but man, does that get people looking. In fact, I've got a friend in Canada, or a friend from Canada who lives here, who's like, oh man, you wrote a story about the first Prime Minister of Canada. And then anyone who hears like, of course, the guy that killed Lincoln. I mean, I know who that is. So it's like a bilateral hook.
I think there's different types of hooks doing different types of things for the story. So I think the title can be a hook. And the particular ones that come to mind for me are Jurassic Park.
Mm-hmm.
An image in your head or what?
Mhm.
Or Dune, or I have no mouth and I must scream. All of those things to me get your attention right away. That's one kind of hook. Another kind of hook is for the blurb. Again, as Marty said, the blurb is important, and I think the biggest thing that the blurb can do is to make you curious about some kind of story question, make you
Right.
want to know how that's going to come out. Is the hero going to be able to beat the evil, global spanning conspiracy or whatever? And then the first time your chapter ends, all of those things can do things to help pull your reader through the story.
Yeah, I think your point about the blurb is really well taken, because the worst kind of blurbs are just a plot summary. Those usually don't hook me at all. Something that raises a question or an emotion or a surprise, that'll actually draw me in as much as the cover will hook me in. A really, really great cover is often a good hook for me, because if the cover is very interesting and conveys the genre, and specifically the kind of story that it is, that's a good hook for me.
You
as
must
well.
never skimp on that cover. That cover is a very important element of any book that you, especially if you're self-publishing. If you're self-publishing, you do have to find a good cover. Do not skimp on that.
Yeah, they say you can't judge a book by its cover unless you're buying it. That's what gets people to pause on the thumbnail as they're scanning through Amazon recommendations. You need to get their attention. You get their attention with a quick hook.
Let me see if you guys would keep reading with these opening lines. This is from I Capture the Castle by Jody Smith. I write this sitting in the kitchen sink. I like that.
Yeah.
Or how about this one from The Outsider by Albert Camus. Mother died today, or maybe yesterday. I can't be sure.
Oh yeah, Camus was a great author, and I did read L'Étrangère.
A pretty famous opening line. And then the last one I'll read is from 1984 by George Orwell. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13.
Oh yeah.
That tells you right away something is different about this world, and I would keep reading.
Right.
Yeah, opening statements, if you can get it like a surprising opening statement, or a shocking comment that is like, damn, that is always a really good one for me. And I just enjoy them. You savor them,
right,
in of themselves. And if they're good enough, it'll get you to buy the book.
One of my favorites of mine, so I'm being a little selfish, but I Remember the Stars. I mean, I think that, and then he goes and lists some of the stars that we know in our local area. And so, wow, it's like, what's going to happen? Why are there no stars? And you move on.
I'm not quite as keen on the first sentence per se, but at least the first paragraph has to at least person to read the next and the next and the next. And you've got to,
right.
The train is just starting out and you've got to start pulling them through the story.
Right. Yeah.
I remember there is one time I was at the Hourlings, our writing group, and David, actually, you're the one who gave me this advice for a scene of mine that I presented. The scene, it was a sci-fi YA novel, one of my books called Starborn, which actually was adapted into a film script. Shameless plug, as all authors do. And the scene was two characters standing on a balcony and looking up into the sky and seeing a spaceship returning to the atmosphere, with a very loud, thunderous rumble. And I had ended the scene just with them looking up. And David, you were saying, that's a pretty good, thematic visual scene. It was a decent cut, but it could be better. It could be a better cut. And you said, something as simple as one the character turning to the other character and saying, "We need to talk," and then leaving the room. Makes it even better.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I added that. I used that advice. So, yeah, just adding even simple threads of drama to cut your scenes with also really adds to having hooks all throughout your book. Not just a hook as to the reader buying it, but the reader has to be hooked to every scene, every chapter. Otherwise, they're going to put it down and not recommend it to their friends.
And in an interesting way, in the scene, so that they want to see the next scene. And if there's a couple more scenes with other characters before you get to the next scene, well, heck, that's what George R.R. Martin does. You don't know what happened to person X because you've got to read 3 more chapters to get to the next section on person X. But you're going to do it because it's George R.R. Martin.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That's a different kind of hook.
Yeah, speaking of different kinds of hooks, there actually is several different categories of hooks, like emotional hooks, for instance. There's lots of different emotions that can be invoked within a hook. Humor is a good one. If you can start off by making a reader laugh right in the beginning, that's a really good hook. You know, it sets expectations. It's how I started reading the Terry Pratchett catalog. I read the first page of Going Postal, and it was hilarious. So it's lots of different ways that you can put hooks in.
Absolutely. I mean, like the book that I'm working on now, Project Chronosphere, which is all based on this massive universe of time travel. The first word in that novel is nailed. You know, dude, French swear. And that's how I started.
Cool. So what else do we got about hooks? Got
Marty,
any,
you were talking about blurbs and having like a hooky blurb. I competed in a contest a couple years ago called Query Combat, and combat I think was spelled with a K. And authors had to submit a blurb for their unpublished manuscript, and they pitted those blurbs against each other in kind of like a bracket style elimination round type competition. And you learned a lot because you got feedback from the judges about, you know, why something was compelling or why something was kind of boring. And one thing that all of them always said was that if a blurb didn't have clear stakes, there really was no hook. And a lot of people would confuse, world building mystique and intrigue with stakes. Having a really cool world and saying in this world there are unicorns that govern kingdoms. I don't know. You know, that's a cool detail about your book, but it's not a stake. It's not a hook. So the magic formula for blurbs is character must do blank before blank or else blank.
Exactly.
Formula. Rewind this podcast and hear it again. And you have a clear stake. You have clear stakes. So that was the most important thing I learned from that competition.
I think we should run a competition like that for the writing.
oh, that'd be fun. That'd be hilarious.
We actually in our group.
I think that the title, the blurb, the cover, those are all hooks to get you to the next thing. You know,
Right.
The title it hooks you in to read the blurb. The cover gets you to read the blurb, and the blurb gets you to read preview pages. You know, you read the first chapter, and that's with an effective hook of one of the many types. It's readers love it.
Yeah, but challenge, I think, because I think some of those things have to be organic. If there's one thing that annoys me, it's sort of the manufactured hooks, so that I have a cliffhanger at the end of every single chapter in a thriller. And I want some of that, but I don't necessarily want every chapter to be high, 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 high. You still need those emotional beats and those funny beats and those other things. And so I think when you're talking about writing hooks going throughout your story, pulling you through the story kind of like a train, at the same time, you have to vary them. you have to vary the types of hooks, because otherwise I think like too much of anything, it becomes self-defeating.
You can't.
Is high stakes action.
Mhm. You can't do that every time. You can't put your main character in peril at the end of every chapter. People are just not going to care anymore. You have to have like, oh, that was really my mother, and that's an emotional beat. And you got to do that sometimes.
And one of my favorite films for that is The Terminator from James Cameron, because as much of an action film as it is, it's still got some slow scenes in it. It's still got some emotional beats.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask me, it's those emotional beats that make The Terminator better than, say, any of the movies that would have been Terminator 3, right? There's something that you care about in the first one that you don't care about in all of the other ones after Terminator 2.
Yeah, Terminator, great film. Love that movie. All right, so let's round this up. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I have a book recommendation for people that are interested in studying writing hooks. It's actually called Hooked, Writing that grabs readers at page 1 and never lets them go, by Wes Edgerton. And I read it and I really liked it. So if you're interested in studying this more, check out that book.
Yeah, we'll put the link to that book in the comments below.
Yep. Oh, and remember, for your blurbs, try not to tell the entire story. That's not what the blurb is for. Just remember, that's an inciting incident. Get them hooked with that inciting incident, because the inciting incident is what occurs in the first few pages.
Dave?
All right. Use the hooks, but use them well. Make me care about your characters, and that's just as strong as some of the hooks.
Yeah, as an author, I recommend, as you start reading more books, look for the hooks, and you can start getting a sense on a really good hook and how they did it, as well as absent hooks and hooks that don't work so well. So that's this week's episode. I like to thank everybody for watching. Thanks again for coming. That's it for this week. Thanks.
Yeah.